Hello and welcome to the Dragon Den. I'm KingofDragons 5000 and today I have another action figure review. Today I'll be taking a look at the Bandai SH Monsterarts Godzilla from Godzilla -1. As we get a look at the Minus Goji out of the box, you can see the Bandai has done a fantastic job with this figure. Unfortunately, Minus Goji is not going to come with any accessories, so we don't get any heat ray or any atomic blasts. As we take a closer look at Minus Goji, Bandai's done a great job with the sculpt work. Godzilla is looking quite impressive, and this is one figure that they had the actual digital renders to base the figure off of. The head sculpt on Godzilla is quite impressive and is pretty accurate to what we saw on screen. They did a really good job with the paintwork going throughout his head, as they did highlight a lot of the recesses and crevices of Godzilla's head. A common issue that this figure has is that the eye paint isn't quite perfect, and on mine the right eye does seem to be a little bit lazy compared to the left eye. And unfortunately, the paintwork on the scar on Godzilla's face isn't quite there on my version, so it does look a little empty. As we take a look at his mouth, you can see that Bandai actually painted the teeth pretty well on this version. Though it does feel a little bit heavy-handed in some areas, the teeth are actually quite painted nicely. And the coloration inside his mouth is quite nice, as it looks very fleshy and looks pretty real. The sculpt work on Minus Goji's torso is quite impressive. As you can see, there's a lot of detailing to go over. The texturing on his skin is quite impressive, and I like the fact that the dry brushing isn't as heavy-handed on this version. Together with the sculpt and the paint, it does a really good job making all those details on his scales and skin pop wonderfully. It is a little bit heavy in some parts, but more subtle in others, giving it a great depth. That impressive sculpt work is going to carry over to Godzilla's arms, where you can see his shoulders have these really massive scales. They do get smaller as they go on to the bicep, and once again the paint job is quite good, as it's not too heavy-handed going throughout his arm. Godzilla is also going to have these elbow spikes protruding out of the back of his arm, and unfortunately we don't get much paint there. However, we do get a lot more painted details going throughout his forearms, and you can see it continues all the way down to his hands. The left hand did get more paint on my version. As you can see, his claws are nicely painted, and on the right hand you can see not as much paint went into it. As we have a closer look at his legs, that sculpt work continues here, and you can see they did a really good job bringing out all that impressive detailing with the dry brushing. Once again, it's subtle enough to bring out all those impressive detailing on his legs, as those scales pop really nicely. Although a little more consistency on his leg would have been a really nice touch. As you can see, going down his leg, the paint does start to fade. And as we get onto his feet, you can see that Bandai actually improved the paint job here, as we get much more detailing here on his feet. And once again, the detailing on his claws is a little bit inconsistent, as some claws got more paint than others. The dorsal plates on Minus Goji look quite impressive and are pretty accurate to what we saw in the movie. The sculpt work in his scales is done wonderfully, and all that detailing is brought out through that impressive paint job. On my version, I did get lucky, as a lot of his dorsal plates do have this really impressive dry brushing. It's not heavy-handed, so all that impressive detail is brought out wonderfully. As we continue down the dorsal plates, the paintwork is going to go all the way to the edge of his tail. One thing to note is, even though that the dorsal plates do have some painted detail, it does appear that Bandai missed the paint on his tail. Although there is some paint on Godzilla's tail, it would have benefited a lot more from that consistent dry brushing throughout his body. So overall, Godzilla is going to have some impressive sculpt work going throughout his body. Unfortunately, the paint is going to be slightly inconsistent in some areas. However, where he does have paint, it shines, and it only highlights how much detailing this Godzilla actually has throughout his body. With the paint and details out of the way, let's compare Godzilla to our usual suspects. As you can imagine, being part of the SH Monsterarts line, Godzilla isn't going to really scale with any toy line. Be it domestic figures or import line, there's really nothing that Godzilla can scale nicely with. However, if you have some Bandai buildings, he will look good with those. Godzilla is going to have a double ball joint in the head, a hinge in the jaw, and a double ball joint in his neck. Godzilla will have ball joints in his shoulders which do hinge outward and do a full 360. Ball joints in his bicep as well as ball joints in his elbow. He will have a double ball joint in his wrist. Godzilla is going to have a double ball joint in his upper torso and a double ball joint in his lower torso. Ball jointed hips will kick forward, go back, out to the side, and rotate inward slightly. He will have a double ball joint in his knee, ball joint in his ankle, and ball joints in his toes. Finally, Godzilla is going to have a multi-segment tail full of ball joints in every segment. Godzilla -1 has to be one of my favorite Godzilla movies, and I am really glad that I picked up the SH Monsterarts Godzilla from Godzilla -1. Although I did miss out on that initial figure, I did pick up the reissue where Bandai did address some of the issues that previous figure had. The joint tolerance on Godzilla is quite consistent going throughout the figure, where I only have issues with his head popping off if I push the figure too far. And the same thing will go with his tail, as it doesn't fall off on its own, it only pops off when I try to push it a little past its limits. I really don't have any issues with mine in terms of quality, as anytime joints pop off, it's basically user error, as I am trying to push the joint farther than what it's intended. It would have been nice to see a little more consistency throughout Godzilla's paint job, however, because it's a lighter dry brushing than that original figure, it actually looks much better. Overall, the only thing that this Godzilla could have really used is an atomic blast, but other than that, it's still a really solid Godzilla. I did pick up my version of Godzilla from Big Bad Toy Store, where he's still available at the time I'm making this video. If you're a fan of Godzilla -1 or just want the superior version of this character, this is a version to pick up. With that being said, thank you for watching another video here on the Dragon Den, but before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and check out all my other Godzilla videos. If you're in a position to help out the channel, check out my Patreon, where I have some exclusive content and early access videos. Check out my Instagram account for new and exciting action figure photos, videos, recent pickups, latest prints, and as always, ring that bell so you never miss another video. And until next time, my loyal Dragonites coming from the Dragon Den, I'm KingofDragons 5000 reminding you to redesign, rebuild, and reclaim. I'll see you next time.